Now that you have a better understanding how elliptic curves can be used in the key exchange process, let's see how we can configure nginx to use that. So here I have an nginx configuration file. So first I'm just gonna define the server, then it's gonna listen on port 443 SSL. The server name is gonna be dojowithrandom.com. Then I'm only gonna allow protocols TLS 1.2. Now remember that the cipher suites define which key exchange algorithm is going to be used. So here I'm going to specify SSL ciphers. And what we can do is define multiple cipher suites separated by colon. So these are the ciphers that I'm going to define. Of course, and not necessarily you have to use all of these ciphers that I specified here and in this order. It's really going to depend on the level of security that you want for your web server and also whether or not you want to support older clients. If you want to support older clients, it might be the case that you might need to use cipher suites which are not as strong as some of these ones. As you can see here, the first cipher suite that I'm defining, it uses the elliptic-curve diffie-hellman ephemeral for the key exchange process. So as long as my client, which can be a browser, OpenSSL, curl, etc., supports this cipher suite, that's probably going to be the one that is going to be used. Now I need to tell nginx where to find the certificate, which is the SSL nginx, and I called this one here. And then the next one is the private key. So certificate underscore key, and then it's the same path, but here is .key. All right, and then finally location slash just return 200, and that's it. Okay, so we have a very simple nginx configuration, and what I'm gonna do next is to build a Docker container so we can run it and send some requests to this nginx server. So in my terminal, I'm going to do docker build -t. I'm going to call it TLS ping, and then you understand later why. Then I'm going to do docker run -d. Now, because this nginx server is running locally, and I didn't set up DNS or anything for my domain, I'm just going to add this option, which is basically telling Docker to go to the host file and add dojowithrandom.com pointing at the local host. So if I do a curl to dojowithrandom.com on port 443, the traffic is just basically going to go to the port 443 locally in the container. That's it. Then I'm going to specify the image name, which is TLS ping. Just want to make sure that nothing happened here. No errors. Yep, no errors. All right. Now let's just go inside the container. First thing, just to verify that the host file was modified. And so we have here dojowithrandom.com pointing at localhost. Then what I can do is curl https dojowithrandom.com. And here it's just complaining that it doesn't know the certificate authority to sign my SSL certificate. And that's because I didn't use DigiCert or GoDaddy or Let's Encrypt or anything like that. I'm just using a self-signed SSL certificate, which was signed by a certificate authority that I created myself. And that's why here you'll see the CA key, the CA certificate, etc. So to bypass that, we're just going to run the same command, but with the option -k, which is an insecure connection, and it's not going to verify the certificate authority. All right, that worked, but didn't return anything. So let me add -v at the end. Okay, so we see that the server returned 200. Now to get a little bit more details about the connection, I'm just going to use the OpenSSL command, ask_client -connect dojowithrandom.com port 443. Okay, what we can see here is that this connection is indeed using that cipher suite that I showed you before, which is a cipher suite that is using elliptic curve. So basically that's it. If you want your web server to use elliptic curve cryptography for the key exchange process, just make sure that you use cipher suites that specify ECDHE, or sometimes you might even see EECDH, but as long as it's diffie-hellman ephemeral using elliptic curves. Now the question is, when it comes to elliptic curves, there are multiple curves that you can use. So how do we check which curve is being used by this connection? Before we get to that, let me just quickly show you which curves I usually used in TLS connections. This is the RFC 4492, and here we can see the supported elliptic curves extension. So you can see that there are quite a bit of curves that can be used in the TLS connection. But now let's just understand what some of these names mean. If you want to know more about recommended elliptic curves, I would recommend that you take a look at this paper, which was written by Standards for Efficient Cryptography. This is a 10-year-old paper, and what we're looking for here is section 2, which is the recommended elliptic curve domain parameters. And that's page 3. So let's go to page 3. Or actually 4, because that's where we have the elliptic curves. All right, some of these names here you can see in the other page. For example, SecP256R1, SecP384R1. So what does this mean? So let's understand the name of these curves. The first portion, which is SEC, that stands for Standards for Efficient Cryptography, which is a group that was founded in 1998 to develop commercial standards that facilitate the adoption of efficient cryptography. Then after that, we have the letter P, which denote parameters over FP. And these parameters you can actually find here at the top. So right here, elliptic curve domain parameters over FP, and then you've got T and all these parameters here. And then after P, we have a number, which denotes the length in bits of the field size P. So if we're using this elliptic curve here, that means the parameter has 256 bits. If we're using this elliptic curve, that means it has 384 bits, etc. Then after this number, we have either R or K. And as it says here, so K denotes parameters associated with the complex curve, and R denotes verifiably random parameters. Then at the end, this number 1 is just a sequence number. I mean, you don't have to understand the math behind elliptic curves, but what you need to understand is just how secure each one of these curves are. But to give you an idea how powerful elliptic curves are, if you use this elliptic curve here, in which the parameter has a length of 256 bits, that's pretty much the same strength as if you're using an RSA key of size 3072 bits. And then here, if you use this curve, which uses a parameter of 384 bits, that's equivalent to an RSA key of size 7680. So what you can see is that with a very small parameter, you can achieve the same strength as a large RSA key. And by the way, in the first video, I mentioned about an elliptic curve that is recommended by the NSA, and that's the one right here. I mean, one could say that there must be a reason why the NSA recommends this curve. Maybe they know something we don't. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about conspiracy theories. I just want you to learn what elliptic curves are and how to use them. All right, now that you know a little bit about the different elliptic curves, let's go back to our terminal and try to find out which curve is being used by our connection. So let me pull up the command again. And what I'm going to add here at the end is -msg. And if I scroll up, that's going to show the breakdown of the handshake. So you can see server hello done, client key exchange. What we're interested in is the server key exchange, this one right here. And this is the information about the server key exchange. The first part, 0C, that means this is a server key exchange message. Then after that, we have the size of the message. The number 3 is just to indicate that what comes next is a named curve. If we go back to the RFC, we can see that there's an enum, which is called named curve. So number 3 is to indicate that the information after that is a named curve. Now the named curve is this one right here. So what we can do is, let me just copy this. Then we're just going to convert from hexadecimal to decimal. So I'm going to paste it here, and that's one number. And that gives me the decimal number 29. If I go back to the RFC, you see that there's no 29 defined here. But after a little research, I found out that 29 is actually this curve. So curve 25519. And this is a curve that offers 128 bits of security. And he also said that this is one of the fastest curves. So before we configure nginx to use a specific curve that we specify, let's just see how fast our TLS handshake is right now. So to measure how long it takes the TLS handshake, I'm going to use a tool called TLS ping. And again, I need to specify this is an insecure connection. Then I'm going to do dojo with renan.com, port 443. So if I run this a few times, so you see that it's making 10 connections. And this is an average of 16 milliseconds. So let me run this again. 15, 18, 11, 12. Okay, so it's between like 10 and 20. Now let's reconfigure nginx to use the elliptic curve that is recommended by the NSA. So I'm just going to do vin nginx conf default. And then here, I'm going to add a new line and SSL underscore ECDH underscore curve. And the curve recommended by the NSA is SECP384R1. All right, let me save this. And let me just reload nginx. Now first, let's do the same thing that we did with OpenSSL. Let's get the server key exchange. So this one right here. So this is the server key exchange. This is the length of the message. And this indicates that it's a named curve. And this is our curve. Now we see that it's different. Before it was 001D. Now it's 0018. Let's take 0018. Go back to the hexadecimal to decimal converter. Convert that. 24. If I go back here, 24 is this one right here. So we can see that now our TLS connection is using this elliptic curve here. And now let's see if this is faster or slower than the previous curve. So let me pull up the TLS ping command again. Okay, now we're getting something different. Before we were getting between 10 to 20 milliseconds. Now we're getting 72. 72, 67, 59, 81. So we see that this takes more time. And that's just because while this curve here offers 128 bits of security, the curve that we're using right now offers 192 bits of security. And if we use this one here, which is even stronger, which is equivalent to an RSA key of 15,360 bits. Let me just configure nginx again. So here is going to be this one. Reload it. And let me just do a TLS ping. So as you can see here, it takes even more time. So 107 milliseconds. 115, 88, not too bad, 109. So yeah, the strength of the curve is going to depend how secure you want your website to be. So I hope that gave you a very good introduction on how to use elliptic curves to protect your websites. And there's actually another thing that I wanted to talk about that is very important when it comes to protecting websites. But that one I'm going to leave for the next video. All right, see you then.